So growing from constraints, like I was explaining, right? One of the biggest things is once you start realizing how am I going to evaluate each constraint at each point, and once what's going to start repeating itself, you're going to start to be able to grow a little faster, right? So we grow by allocating and prioritizing resources. All right. So the first thing that most subcons that come through the program tell me is like, well, what are our resources? Right. The resources are what's available to not just me and you, but honestly, what's available to the whole industry at large. General contractors. All right. Those are our ideal clients. Those are available to me, you, and whoever wants to reach them. That's why you found the online permitting. That's why I can find them. Okay, another resource that's available to us is going to be the marketing methods that we use to reach out to these GCs. Cold call, emails, etc. We have the information, right? We have the internet. That's how you found my content. That's how we find everybody's content. And this is, everybody has access to this. What use are we making out of it? And obviously the time. And I think this one is going to be the most important because this is one of the biggest things to solve for is, okay, I'm hands-on now, but I need to be more hands-off. It's all about creating time slots that you can fulfill more important stuff in, right? So we understand that these are 4 resources that are for everyone. How do we grow with them, essentially? How do we grow with each one of these resources? The easiest way that I can put it is in just really quick, three really quick steps, which is number 1 is identifying which of these we lack, right? So are you finding the GCs? I think you are. The next one, right? Are you using the internet? I would say yes. I'm almost confident it's mostly the time because you're really hands-on. I'm really hands-on. So the time blocking is always going to be the one that we kind of always lack. All right. But once we find the one that lacks and the one that makes sense for you is, are we giving them priority in our day-to-day, right? So how much of our focus are we giving that constraint that we're lacking or that resource that we're lacking? And then once we lack that one and we give it our focus, are we making sure that it's the one that's going to move us forward? Because all of these will make sense. But depending on where you are, one of them is actually going to move the needle forward and the other one might just overwhelm you because it's a little too far ahead, right? So in short, if we focus on the biggest and or our only constraint, then we're going to grow faster. That's just the way that it works, okay? Now here's the flow that you as a subcontractor, me as a subcontractor, we all need in our business. The first one is leads, okay? We need to learn how to get them and then how to get them consistently. Then we go into our opportunities. So we need to learn how to get those leads to reply to us so that then they can become awardings. All right. And then once they become awardings, how do we execute consistently? And then how we get them to continue to use us, right? The repeat work. This is where the consistent workforce. Now this flow, what it really represents is 5 core functions in any business. And the way that it works in us is the same way, right? 5 core function. Number 1 is the leads or the marketing. Okay, what are we doing on here? How do we have this to continually flow throughout our system? The opportunities, which is the lead nurture or the follow-up. The awardings, which just translate over to sales. The execution is the fulfillment. And then the repeat GCs becomes reoccurring work. And all of these 5 together is what gives us consistent work. All right, subs sometimes think if I can get a lot of leads, I'm going to get consistent work, but they're missing all of the next 4 that comes, right? Or the first 3, and then they don't realize that they need to continue to execute and fulfillment the same way you did. The trickiest part here is the same way that you execute on client number 1 through 5, you have a lot of time. That has to continue to happen when you're at clients 20 and 30, right? Right now we have 45 GCs that give us consistent work, and it's a pain in the ass being able to keep that same service level that we gave to them when we only had 5 versus now, right? It's a whole different beast. I'll go into how that works as you go forward. So how do you find the one to focus on, right? How do you find which one you're going to focus on and which one you're struggling with the most? We're going to think about each one of these. I'm just going to talk about the constraints. What I would suggest is kind of just digest which one it is. At the end of it, we'll talk about that one, right? So leads, how many of them are you getting consistently, right? I think you said you have 90 currently in your system, right? How many do you need to get to that level that you want to be? Whether it's $1 million a year, whether it's 10 million a year, you got to start breaking down the math. Okay, I've got 90. I got work from 5 of them. I'm about at 10%, right? I need to get that up to 30%, ideally. Okay, how much more do you need to add? How much more lead scraping do you need to do? That's one that you could be struggling with. Opportunities. How do I get more of them to reply, not asking me about my insurances, but asking me if I'm ready to take on work, right? Big difference in a switch in email language. Then once I get that reply, how can I get them to send me the bid, or the drawings, which is one of the struggles. And then when I submit that bid, how can I make sure that they actually don't go ghost and really tell me either yes or no, right? And we got to understand why they're saying no. Execution, how can I continue to execute at the same way while I'm reducing my time on the field and starting to increase someone else's time on the field? Doing the work the same way that we want to do it. This is, in short, is a culture. Like, this is a lot to do with culture here. And then how do we get them to repeat, right? Because the GC will award you. They'll give you a shot. And the thing about GCs is they're not very communicative. They want communication, but they're not communicating themselves. They won't tell you, oh, you did a great job. Some will, some won't tell you, right? We need to make that a habit from them. We need to get them to talk, all right? So think about each one of these 5 core functions, and then think about which one you're in the most, right? Which one is the one that's kind of been popping up the most, whether it's one of those, and forget about everything else going forward right now, okay? Forget about the other ones. Think about the one that first resonated with you the most, and only focus on that going forward, right? Because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give you the fix to the constraint. It's only going to be one of these 3, all right? The fix to your current constraint is only going to be one of these, which is it's either going to be a person, it's either going to be a process, or it's either going to be a software. These are the only 3 fixes. And then these will continue to repeat themselves. So what I really like about these is if it's a person, you're going to be forced to teach them. If it's a process, you're going to be forced to create it. If it's a software, you're going to be forced to filter the ones you currently have. All right. When I go into each one of these, I'm going to give examples. So person, I'm going to break it down to each of the 5 core function, right? Marketing, opportunities, awarding, lead nurture, execution, and then repeat. So in the person, right, you have to teach someone else to do it for you. Training, in my opinion, I think this is the hardest, and I think this is the least leveraged because it adds overhead. That's just my opinion. But some people, like we're at the beginning, this is going to be the one you need. This is what your wife does, right? You're leveraging her. So in marketing, how can you send on your behalf? Okay, that's what you're going to teach that person to do within marketing. On lead nurture is how to reply to the emails. All right, start teaching, hey, if they say this, you're going to reply this way. If they say that, you're going to reply that way. On the sales is how to negotiate the deals, because you can very well have something in your brain where you're like, okay, dude, if they want a price reduction, I'm good at a 10 or a 15% deduction. She needs to know that, right? She may not know that percentage that you can still operate in. On the execution, like I said, this goes back to culture, which in my opinion, this is probably the hardest one, is how to work. How are your guys going to do the work themselves and still stay at a level that you want it to be? Okay, and then the repeat work. We have to understand how you go about asking for more work when you're with the one GC. Because like I said, if we leave it to the GCs, they're not going to be the best at communicating. We have to pull that from them. So what kind of questions, when do we come into these conversations? How do we go about it? Process. In marketing, our process could be something like every Sunday we schedule our outbound. This is a process for me. My marketing gets taken care of every Sunday. Now it's at a quarterly cadence. So, 2 hours a quarter, I set everything up and I forget about it, right? This is something that a lot of people can benefit from if they just pick either on a monthly cadence, on the weekly cadence, but you have to do it ahead of time. Okay, on the lead nurture, a process could be, following up until you receive plans, how many follow-ups typically, and then following up 48 hours after you submit. Now, the follow-up 48 hours isn't, hey, am I awarded? But it's, hey, did you receive our proposal, right? But you open that up into a 2-week cadence where now you're asking for the job and if it was awarded. On a sales, a typical process that I like to use is the expiration tie down, right? You put an expiration date to your proposal 2 to 3 days before that proposal expires. You ask them, hey, do you want to go forward or do you need a little more time to think about this? That's a good process on the sales. And on the execution, depending on your scope, but for us, like on stucco and siding, the guys know that it's 1 wall per day. All right. If you can do more, go for it. It's not going to be less, but it's a minimum 1 wall per day. Really well done. And then on the process for getting consistent work is During this on-site conversation, when the supervisor comes and is asking you, hey, how are things going, right? This is where you're having those very human-to-human conversations. Just, hey, man, what else are you working on? Hey, what else do you have? And getting that conversation flowing so they can already know, hey, oh, he's trying to take on more work. Okay, on the apps software side of things, how are these going to solve it? For marketing, you got to automate your outbound, right? If you go manual is going to only get you up to about 10 GCs. Once you're on there, you're going to be so hands-on, so much admin work coming in that you're not really going to be able to sustain it. On the lead nurture, you're going to automate reminders or scheduled emails. All right, that's how you systemize that. And on the sales, you need to have that bird's eye view, right? You need to see where your projects are, what's going on, what needs to happen. The execution is your project organization, which is the same one as the repeat work. Your level of project organization, which has to do with the communication cadence, which have to do with your materials being on site, all those two between the execution is what gives you that repeated work, right? So those two tie in together really well. Now, where you are right now is going to dictate the solution that you need to lean into, right? So where you are right now is going to tell you which one to go into. So for example, a lot of the subs that I talk to, if they're just starting off with no capital, adding more software isn't going to be the best solution because it's going to increase your overhead, and a lot of them are already struggling to keep up with it, right? So you need to actually lean into creating processes. So again, picking a day to do all your estimating, picking a day to do all your scheduling, picking a day to do all of your outbound email. It's a process that's going to give you the solution if you're at the beginning. If you're already a little more ahead, all right, you got consistent work coming in, then you already have some kind of process that's working for you. It's more of either teaching a person to do it for you really well or getting a software that's going to give you more clients and more time, right, going forward. Now, if you're above that, right, if you're doing 2 million already, you have people in place that know what to do, the admin, the outbound marketing, and they're following certain processes. So now what you need to look for is an actual software that's at your level now, right? Some of these that we start off with, stay at a certain level. They don't have the automations we need, but we need that software to be not only expedite our personnel's process already, but also give them more time for them to tell you, hey, if this software could do this, it'd make my life easier. Again, that one's a little more ahead, but these are 3 examples of that. So here's the thing though, and this is what I was talking to you about at the beginning, right? As you fix one of these problems, another one is gonna come up, right? But the key to this is as you fix one, the previous one has to maintain itself. That's the secret. So right now, you're doing your outreach, cool. As you increase that, if that drops any amount, it's going to be more of a headache to continue to go forward. You have to come back and say, okay, what's happening here, right? Am I not responding fast enough? Am I not doing enough volume? So as you increase, the previous one has to stay at the level that it's in, and then that's when it grows, right? So what I find that at this time, most of the time, our biggest constraint is just ourselves, though. It's ourselves because we may lack the skills that we need, right? So we need to go and find the skill that we actually need first, right? I can't tell somebody, hey, this is how you're going to outbound market if I really don't understand it at a proficient level. I can't tell somebody how to estimate if I'm still messing up on my estimates, right? I can't tell somebody how to convert if I still get shaky when I'm on the phone. So we need to identify what skill am I lacking? Okay, let me go learn that skill. And now we decide whether it's a process, a person, or a software that takes and gives us more time on that. All right. So one question that I always continually ask myself is, what do I lack that'll help me fix my current constraint and keep the flow? Right? Or again, that 5 core function, that flow, we need to have leads always coming in, opportunities always popping up, leads always converting, work getting executed, and then GCs giving us work consistently. If that's not happening, there's no growth that's going to happen anyways because that flow isn't flowing the way it needs to be. Okay? And once you figure out, so right now, you have a current constraint that you're thinking about. Okay, cool. I need to go acquire that new skill. I need to get proficient in that new skill. And once you understand that skill and you say, okay, I need to do this better. Again, this is the solution, right? My wife is going to do it better for me. My assistant is going to do it better than I am, right? And then once that gets done better, it's more efficient, the quality isn't dropping, now we need to go do more of that. A lot of us, this is where we are. This is where we are. You have the skill, the marketing skill. You have someone doing it or software taking care of that marketing for you. How do I do more? Now I need to do more volume, right? 100 emails a month in a quarter isn't going to get you to the level you want. You need 1,000. Cool. And then once you figure out, oh shoot, I got a list of 1,000. That's cycling. That's running perfectly. Okay. Now how can I go from 5 active clients to 20? And then you go and you start this cycle again. Find a new skill. You need to go find that new skill. You need to do that skill better. And then you need to do more of it. And then you move on to the next one. Now usually the progression is at that point, it's like, okay, now I need to find a new method, a new way of estimating. I need to do it better and I do it more. And then once that one gets solved, oh shit, now I need to do better admin, more new, better, more new. As you grow, this is the way it goes. And again, each of these steps that you take forward, you need to make sure that the step behind it doesn't drop quality. If you can focus on that, your business grows really, really quick. So a few of the takeaways that I would like to point out is, first, figure out which of the core functions need to improve. All right. So is it leads? Is it the replies? Is it the converting the replies into signed agreements, execution, or getting the repeat work? Forget about everything else for the next quarter. Fix it with either a person, a process, or a software. Okay. And then as a side note, which is the reality of this, is that if you don't know how to fix it, it's because you lack the skill set. And this is probably the point where a lot of subs have trouble. And I'll say that myself, because I knew what I was lacking. I didn't want to reach out to somebody to teach me. I wanted to figure it out myself. Once I started reaching out to somebody to help me fix it that already knew how to fix it, I cut my time in half by like 1,000%. Like the things that was going to take me 6 months to learn anyways, I learned it in 30 days and I was implementing by week 1. Huge difference, right? But obviously this comes with a what is it called? Like an exchange that has to happen. And the exchange is going to be monetary or time-wise. You want to wait 6 months? You want to wait a week? It's up to you, right? But there's some kind of payment and exchange that you have to do. Cool? So any comments, thoughts, or questions on any of that?